Ihr Lieben, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge Social First, but this week it's in English. Let's do a quick German disclaimer. Ihr Lieben, diese Woche ist Social First auf Englisch. Wir haben eine Folge aufgenommen, ein Interview aufgenommen, das allererste Mal, also quasi zwei Premieren in einem. Das heißt, wir haben eine Folge auf Englisch und ein Interview gleichzeitig. Die Folge dürft ihr nicht verpassen, aber jetzt a quick intro in English. I think anyone who works in social media or wants to work in social media has thought once in their lifetime, oh my God, I want to be part of that event, I want to go to the event, and then you hit the jackpot and then you're invited and you're the one who's supposed to cover the content for this event. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, how do I do this? And I found myself in that, position before. And I had to cover an event of like 100 people. And then you go there and you're like, oh no, there's so much going on. There's like a photo booth. There's a DJ. There's a supermodel who's like hosting this event. There's a C-list celebrity and there's like other people. Where do I even start? Now, this question will be solved today because we're gonna talk to Alex Walker in this interview. He worked for the Eurovision and did the social media coverage for it. As you can imagine, the social media coverage for an event who has 160 million viewers. It's a live broadcast. It's known all around the world. That's another kind of pressure, and that's also another kind of experience. So we're gonna get that insight from him today, what it's like working on such a big project, on such a big event throughout the whole year as a social media manager, and he's gonna spill the tea. Let's go.
Hello everyone. Today we have a very cool topic. It's one of the biggest event in Europe. It's a year. And what I usually do is I gather all my friends. We're having a watch party, having drinks, having food. And you know it, we're talking about the Eurovision Song Contest. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. And for this episode, we have a very special guest. It's also our first interview, who has been working on this event for quite some time. So super excited to have him, as well as getting all his insights and all the information. So hello, Alex. Welcome to Social First.
Thank you so much. So of course, my name is Alex. Maybe tell, I'm from England. I'm currently now living in Germany, but I spent the past 10 years really building my career in England. I have a background mainly in marketing, PR, and also social media. Big brands, predominantly focusing on entertainment, TV, and film. At the moment, I'm working for a e-commerce or retail brand, really focusing on brand strategy and really kind of taking social media marketing, more kind of effects such as like AI, culture, trends, and really trying to take the brand and kind of really have it in the forecast of conversation.
I love it. It sounds like a very holistic but also in-depth knowledge. So hope to learn something from you. And how did you first get into social media?
Good question. So I actually started out in PR. My career was really focusing on TV, film, PR. So, working with production studios, talents, directors, producers, etc. Mostly consumer PR, but also a little bit of corporate. So working directly also with like production company. But I think as the landscape changed, also so did the kind of marketing strategies, right? So when I first started, it was all about kind of big PR stunts, huge marketing, out of home, etc. Influencer marketing was there, but it wasn't really as huge as it is now. And especially the idea of like being able to build an entire brand on social media also was at the tip of the conversation, right? It really kind of hadn't started yet, but it was definitely that kind of idea in the air that actually, hey, this could be something. So like I mentioned, we kind of were focusing mostly on PR to deliver to our clients. And then I was working with an agency. And at some point, the agency also changed and evolved, and we got a social media department. And I was one of the first within the agency to kind of really pioneer that for the agency and kind of start to offer that for our clients.
You were there at the beginning, and now I think you've experienced all the turns and evolvements throughout social.
So, yeah, but my big question is, I think for a lot of people working for the Eurovision in social media sounds like the dream job, How did you land this job in the first place? How did you get into this job?
Yeah, I mean, it really was a dream job and really is a dream job. The way that we approached it was actually, it's a company called the European Broadcasting Union, who are effectively the kind of owners of the Eurovision Song Contest. And everything that they had done in terms of marketing, almost in-house. Like they worked with agencies, but they exclusively worked for the Eurovision Song Contest. So they didn't necessarily have any kind of marketing, PR, or social support from an agency who had a more holistic view, let's say, of the kind of digital landscape. So they were really keen to, I think, focus on building brand because it is such an iconic brand, but I think it has like a lot of tendencies because it's hosted in different countries every year. It always has a slightly different spin, right? So I think they wanted an agency that could help support them and really kind of understand that level of brand, of detail, and offer a 360 service of not only marketing, but also PR and social. So I actually got the role because I was working at an agency and we pitched. And we were fortunate enough to win. And it was just like such an exciting moment. Like I can't even tell you when we found out that we had won the retainer, like the office went crazy because like you said, it's an iconic brand. It's so much fun. I mean, it's inherently culture, music, fashion, of course, like it was just so much fun.
So what was the task? Like the first thing, what was basically the goal back then? When did you work there? And like, what was the goal? To establish the brand or what was the thing?
Yeah, so this was back in like 2016 when we were working with the Eurovision Song Contest. We first started working with the Eurovision Song Contest. And I think the brief, if you will, was to establish the brand as a credible song contest across Europe. I think there's a huge mix of sentiment when it comes to the Eurovision Song Contest, right? I think some countries and markets are super invested and they love it. There's other markets that may be less invested or, you know, maybe kind of see it as, you know, less of a kind of a national interest. So I think the scope across Europe is huge and the perception across Europe is also huge. So really we were there to kind of bring all of the artistry and the incredible production value and the credibility that all of these artists have across Europe. So that way there was this idea of a huge brand understanding and acknowledgement that this was a really, really credible singing contest and a really incredible production. Like if you look at the time that they have every year to put this together, it's insane. So really this was our brief. It was really very much driven around how do we take the Eurovision brand and really kind of make it stand out more within culture and make it more relevant. Because I think when we took over the Instagram channel, I think we had something like less than 250,000 followers. And if you think about the Eurovision Song Contest, right, there's not a single person that does not know the Eurovision Song Contest. So it would seem crazy that the Instagram has only 250,000 followers, right? You would think it would be within its millions. But at the time when we inherited the brand to look after the marketing, PR and social strategy, it was nowhere near what it could have been.
So you got the retainer, you got the job, you were the social media person. Do you remember any of like the first steps that you took? And also like what was the journey there? What was the first country you worked on?
Yes, it was actually incredible. So we got the account and they flew us out to Sweden. Because I think we just started around, I think the contest is normally around like the 12th, between the 12th and 15th of May every year. So they flew us out to Sweden to watch the, I think it was the final in Stockholm. So my first experience of Eurovision was being out to Stockholm in what they call the Eurovision Village, which is basically this dedicated area with the arena, also shops, bars. Like really, if you go to Stockholm, you have to leave this village. The hotel's also there. Like it's like a Eurovision world. And I think this was the first insight into realizing that the people that are invested in this are really invested in. Like the fans for the Eurovision Song Contest are so hardcore and they really are the biggest heart of the contest. And you realize that, wow, people really take this seriously. So my first insight was going out to Stockholm and seeing just the fandom and the kind of scale of everything. And also, of course, meeting all of the core members of the European Broadcasting Union that helped set this up. So all of the delegations, all of the corporate comms team, the PR team, and just trying to really understand the idea of what everyone does, the scope of work, the roles and responsibilities. And really it is huge. So this was my kind of first taste of the Eurovision Song Contest.
Let us know a bit, how does a day-to-day look like, or what was your routine, or what are the things you worked on, and where did you work on? Was it out of Sweden? Was it at home? Did you move to another countries? Or how did it look like for you?
I think the craziest thing about working with the Eurovision Song Contest is that there is no day-to-day. Really, every day is so incredibly different, and you think you come into work that day and you think you know what your day is going to be like, and then something happens, you receive an email, there's an announcement, and you're like, okay, my day is now completely different. So I think that was the most exciting thing about working for the Eurovision Song Contest, is like it really, really was completely different almost every day, because we're also dealing with, depending on how many participants, from like up to 46 or 47 different markets. So that's also 47 different producers, 47 different broadcasters, 47 different artists, 47 different PR stories and social media marketing strategies, right? So the kind of breadth of the role was huge. So everything was always very, very different. We were based out of London. So of course, it's a huge European. We were in London. This was also, of course, pre-pandemic. So it was very much like Monday to Friday at the office, every single day, you're 9 till 6. But for a role like the Eurovision Song Contest, I would also say that because you're dealing with people, right, of course it is a brand, but at the heart of the brand are people, artists, producers, songwriters, etc. It does almost have this idea of kind of like 24/7, right? Because there is this idea of things change. Of course, artists, they have questions, they have different needs, they have their own also kind of strategies when it comes to how do I present myself to this huge European audience. So you're really kind of across the clock. But if you love it, it doesn't really feel like work, because it's also such a people job, and it's great to work with such creatives, such great artists. So really, really loved it. And the travel was insane. Like, it was insane because, of course, we have to go all over Europe. We have to support a lot of the broadcasters and their artists from, announcement stages, but all the way through to the final. We also have to understand, the production, check on the venue, make sure everything is running. You have up to, 50 to 100,000 spectators coming to a venue expecting to see a show. And some of these countries didn't have the arenas, right? Or maybe they had to be extended or set up slightly differently. So we were also back and forth making sure that the kind of the production, the crew, the tech crew had everything that they need, because everything plays back into marketing, PR and social media, right? So we also wanted to make sure that from an audience point of view, they had the best show possible. So we were working very, very closely, holistically with all of the producers and broadcasters. The travel was a lot. And what a lot of people don't know about the EBU is that it's not just the Eurovision Song Contest. So we, of course, worked on the Eurovision Song Contest, but there's also the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, there's Eurovision Young Dancers, Eurovision Musicians. So it's a huge, almost kind of franchise, you could say. So there was a lot of travel also involved.
So you were working on all of them, on all of the franchises, and not just on the Eurovision that probably everyone knows?
Yeah, exactly. And they have different perceptions in different countries. So, for example, some markets really play the the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, whereas in the UK, for example, it doesn't get shown. But the UK do participate within it. It's just not mainstream. You have to really kind of want to find it. They don't push it in the same way, but it's huge. So the scale of the contest goes way beyond just the Eurovision Song Contest.
That is so interesting. You have only the once a year, but then if you have like the junior ones and the other events, always just feed the people what they want. But like, as you mentioned already, like 47 countries, right? Artists, producers, name it. Then you have thousands of people watching it, being fans. What are your biggest challenges to really balance it? Different needs, different expectations. What were your biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think there were absolutely many challenges. I think you mentioned before the fans. The fans are the heart and soul of the contest. When you are a fan, you have people that, some people have grown up with the Eurovision Song Contest, you're really kind of like OGs, and then you have people that are discovering it, potentially for the first time. So you really have a huge audience. And I think trying to find that balance between, giving what they want, but also realizing that sometimes there's certain things that you have to hold back, right? Because maybe you want to solve for later, or maybe they're kind of less relevant. And the fans also run a majority of like the specific Eurovision media. So there are websites, editorial news outlets that really just focus on Eurovision news. So we worked really, really closely with those editors, really kind of support in terms of telling that narrative. But importantly for us, we also had a brand lens. So we also wanted to make sure that we were still building brand, and we were still also, trying to offer this kind of authenticity and also excitement. So we don't want everything, to be out there kind of from an editorial perspective. There's some things that also as a brand you want to own when it comes to announcements. And this was really, really tricky. The editors of the outlets of course, were such fans that they also, had really great contacts with the delegates from all of the different 47 markets, etc. So they would always be in contact with them saying, hey, like, we want to know who your artist is. We want to know what song they're going to sing. Do you have any news that we can share? And we were always like, hold off a second, you know what I mean? Like, give the Eurovision Song Contest the news first. So that way we can like really understand like how do we place this in a strategic way? How can we create really great social content out of this? So one of the challenges really was the fans, they were so dedicated to sharing the news with the contest. They kept us on our toes. Actually, like, hey, wait a second, like, let's see if we can collaborate here. Let's see if we can, understand how we can kind of push this story in a more impactful way. So I think they were always on our heels in terms of news, kind of breaking story, gossip, songs. They were right there behind us.
But is it like, because we're talking pre-show, right?
Yes.
Because Haley also mentioned, like, how does it work? When would you go to the actual location, and then when would the fans arrive?
Good questions. It's kind of like a huge international event. When, for example, the Olympics gets announced, or things like people start booking their hotel and their accommodation immediately after the country has won. We also head there. I mean, as soon as the song contest is finished, the next day, we start working on the next one. We start working with the broadcasters, with the delegations to figure out how we're going to set this up. I would say from an EBU perspective, it's really within the first week or so that they already arrive within the host country to start negotiations and kind of figure out the strategy behind the production and the setup to make sure that the fans and the artists all have a really, really great experience. So it's immediate. There's no like rest. It's not like one song contest finishes and then you're like, okay, great. Now I can chill for the next couple of weeks. It's like go straight into it and you start the excitement again. For the audience, it's like they have these moments where the artist is maybe announced and then the song is and then the contest comes and there's like little bursts. But when you work for the Eurovision Song Contest, that like Eurovision joy every single day. Like it's always ongoing. It's super exciting.
But so let's pretend we're in the pre-show right now. When would be like the final moment for you to actually go there? How much time did you spend there? Did you like arrive 3 months in advance, or how did it work?
Yeah,
I mean you probably could not spend the time in London.
Exactly. So we were back and forth throughout the year, constantly meeting with the broadcaster to arrange the strategy, the PR plans, like I mentioned before, also just to check on the venue and understand, how that could impact from a PR perspective, but also really trying to work collaboratively with the broadcaster on a cohesive strategy, right? In terms of like, how do we incorporate the Eurovision brand also with the potential objectives that the host broadcaster has. So there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of communication, a lot of strategy, and a lot of that is also easily sold in person. So yes, there was a lot of back and forth and travel throughout the year. I would say it intensifies the closer you get to the competition. And then once the competition is happening, we're there for at least on site from 3 to 4 weeks, covering the entire, all of the semi-finals, finals, etc., working directly with the artists. Because for us, as the owners of the brand, from a marketing point of view, from a social media point of view, it's incredibly exciting because you get all of the artists in one place. So this is your time now where you can, collaborate on content, create different formats. You also get artists meeting each other right within the dressing room, within the backstage. So many magical moments happen within these first few weeks before you even get to the live show that are just so beautiful to be able to capture and be a part of. So we were there for weeks and weeks at the venue. And really, get to the hotel, have your breakfast, you go straight to the venue, you're there for like maybe 12 hours, and then you go back home, you sleep, and then you're straight back at the venue again. But it was always super, super exciting, and you're just constantly meeting, talking to people, creating content, talking with artists and music writers and dancers and musicians. So it really doesn't feel like work. Of course, there's stressful moments, but it just feels like this incredible, content creation workshop with just the most incredibly talented artistic people you've ever met. So it's just like so much fun.
Is there a moment or something you can think about you were super proud of, or you were like, oh, I remember this and this, and you were like, this is super cool, or some piece of content you published, you were like, this was a highlight or something like that?
I think there were so many accomplishments. I think the first year was also really just trying to understand the brand as much as possible and also understand, the relationship that the broadcasters also have to the brand and how we can, of course, make the most impact. I think from a content point of view, the thing that I love the most, literally kind of like this creative workshop that, we would kind of sit down and we would think about, okay, what is trending within social media? What is trending within culture? And how can we create a content series with the artists to really kind of focus on that, to have really great social contents? We would also just come up with the ideas. And then this is also how long ago it was, right? But you had this emoji trend. I don't know if you both remember, where you would give like a question, right? Or kind of an answer. And you would say, hey, how do you feel about X? Or how do you feel about Y? And then you hold up a different emoji, right?
It's probably going to come back.
It will come back, exactly.
Like all of the social media
we'll bring
trends
it
from
back
then.
And this was a lot of fun, right? Because we would literally have to, figure out but we were also like responsible for also, the production of the emojis. And then we would go to the concert and then, work with them. And it was really funny, right? Because of course, some of them are also completely social savvy. They kind of get it. And then some of the artists would be like, I'm totally confused. Like, what? Like, I'm like, what do you want me to do? So it was always just such a fun experience. So I think in terms of what I'm proud of when I look back at my time at the Eurovision Song Contest, and just how many hats that I had to wear as a social media manager. Not only from the channel itself, but also being a producer, being an editor, being a copywriter. Literally also filming the content. So being a cameraman, but also being a director. It was huge, right? But I think I also learned so much.
I think that is a very good point. It sounds like such a dream job to many, I assume, like working for such a big event. I think everyone wants to go to events and cover events and be there and be part of it. But then when you're there, it feels also like a lot of pressure, right? Maybe we can talk about this one final big moment when, the final show arrives, the big live show arrives. What was the typical day for you on the day of the big final show? Maybe we can talk through the show a little bit and also tackle how do you even, create content for such a big show? Because if you've ever covered an event, even though maybe there's 100 people attending, you're already confused. So just imagine with, 160 people watching in front of the TV and then so many people inside of like an arena. Where do you even start? So, okay, let's start with your everyday routine. What would it look like? Let's start from there.
So the final was honestly electric. Like really, it is this kind of moment that everybody's building up to. It's also in some territories with the audiences, especially on like the mainstream broadcasters, it's the first touch point with the Eurovision Song Contest, right? Because many broadcasters only show the final. So the energy and the atmosphere is electric. And it's also super cathartic because everything that you've been working up towards this year is finally happening tonight, So you wake up and you're just like, you almost can't believe the whole year has kind of gone so fast. And then in your mind, you're also super excited, right? Kind of figure out who's going to win. Because of course, this also then plays into where the next country is going to be hosted in. And sometimes we would also have like things where we think, well, we hope it's somewhere like Malta, so it's like a really beautiful vacation, you know what I mean? So we would also have our own like ideas of countries that we would love to win. And then we would also try and figure out, okay, well, who do we as the people working with the Eurovision Song Contest or the EBU think are going to win, right? I think that's also really exciting.
Which countries did you go to? Like which countries did you end up covering in the end?
So many. Of course, Sweden, Lisbon, Ukraine. These are also not in order, by the way. I'm just listing them off of the ones that I remember. but before the fans start saying that absolutely did not happen in this order. But yeah, Sweden, Ukraine, Lisbon, Malta for the Junior Eurovision Song Contest, Georgia also for the Junior Eurovision Song Contest. It was basically from 2016 until 2019 or 2020 because I worked with them up from that point until the first COVID hit, which was the first time in the history that the Eurovision Song Contest did not air. And then that's when I also kind of changed careers. So honestly, the amount of countries that I went to, it's hard to also remember, but yes, so many.
Okay, going back to the show. So when would your day start, like the process? Maybe you can guide us through the day, a little day in the life of Alex Walker, final day of the Eurovision.
Absolutely. I mean, the venue itself is always insane. So you walk in and we had set up a press desk. That way, if you were anyone from the media or from the fan zones, any of the fan websites, you were always able to find us. So that way we had like a very kind of collaborative work approach when it came to editorial but also content creation. But It's also kind of set out as what you can imagine like Wall Street to look like. You walk into this venue and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of desks. And at these desks are editors, writers, all waiting to cover the Eurovision Song Contest, right? Because it's real time and it's live and they want to be there on the ground. So you have everyone from, BBC to sometimes US outlets, huge international outlets all across Europe, also the fan media outlets, all in one room. So the atmosphere is also super, super electric. And at this stage, we really then focus on the kind of final moments with the artists. So, kind of maybe we'll do quick Q&As when they are backstage or within the dressing room. Some of it is quite proactive. So we will, literally walk around the venue and where appropriate, because of course we also understand that it's the final. Some of these artists are nervous, but they also want to rehearse, they want to practice. So we try and offer the opportunity to, film and get content. But of course, it's never like obligated. If they need to take the time to just breathe and rehearse and get ready for the biggest event, chill of their life potentially. Of course, that's there.
But would you say like that you also pre-plan content? Like how much is pre-planned or how much is actually just very spontaneously happening on the ground?
Most is spontaneous, to be honest. Most is spontaneous, and the reason being is these are serious artists. And this is their opportunity on a global stage to present themselves literally 40 up to 50 European markets. That exposure and that opportunity is almost unheard of anywhere outside of the Eurovision Song Contest. And also, there is a certain amount of pressure that's with it. So, of course, we plan certain moments where we have slots with each of the artists, where we say, like, this is the time that we would love to meet you and get content. It's also super relevant and exciting for them because we're able to, broadcast you on the social media channels. It gives the fans an opportunity to get to know you better. And in a voting metric where people are voting, to keep you in, it's very, very important to be able to share your personality and your kind of identity as much as you can. But we're also aware that, it's a very, very important opportunity for these people. And we also need to give them the space and for them to feel comfortable and to rehearse. So we have small slots throughout the weeks where it's dedicated to content. And this is where we would come up with our ideas, our social trends, our games. But then most of it was spontaneous. If they were, felt like creating content, then absolutely we could. If we saw them in the dressing room, we say, hey, would you like to do something right now? Sometimes they would say yes. Sometimes respectfully, they would say, no, I'm saving my voice, for example. Like I'm, really excited about the contest and I'm on bed, I'm voice rest, I can't speak. So it was really dependent, but most of it was spontaneous, just capturing in the dressing room.
But the pressure was also on for you guys, right? Because if there's no like really proper yes and approval from also the artist side, of course, I mean, they want to be covered, right? But still, you didn't know what the content was going to look like. And I think for a big day like that, we're already like super excited and you feel probably the extra pressure. So
actually, one of the most magical moments was the spontaneity of it all. I remember one time in Tel Aviv, I was just walking through the stage to go from one side to another, and you get sometimes a lot of artists waiting, right? Because we do dress rehearsals, etc. So we do run-throughs of the show, of course, before they're live. And there was this moment where there would just happen to be like 6 or 7 of the artists all together backstage. And then just super quickly, we created this piece of content with them all together. Also just kind of socializing. And then it was just such a beautiful moment, really felt like BTS behind the scenes. But then you got this insight of all the artists together, right, which is also not super common into what you can see. And honestly, it was just such a great piece of content, and this was so spontaneous, and it just was happening because I was walking from one side to somewhere else, and then you see it, you go, I need to capture this now. That spontaneousness is really magic because it's also what the audience don't get to see, and it just gives you an insight of being real and authentic. I think this is also the perfect description of you always need to be on, right? Because you could have also just passed them and been like, oh, whatever, they're just sitting there hanging out, having a good time. So I think for somebody like you who was really on the spot, it was
your task also to really like sourcing content everywhere and from every situation. I remember you saying now you stopped working for them. And was there ever a moment for you where you felt like, oh, I'm going to do this for, I don't know, 3 years and after that I'm going to be done? Or is this something that you could have done for, I don't know, 10 years? Because it's also quite exhausting, I assume.
Yeah, it was never something that I thought about leaving. Yeah, such an amazing opportunity and such an amazing song contest. I just think the partnership came to a very natural end. And then with COVID, you know, for me, it was also time to explore different opportunities and also just moving outside of London and moving to kind of more into kind of mainland Europe. So for me, it just felt like a very natural progression. But I think it's one of those things where like the people that do work for the Eurovision Song Contest and the EBU, been there for like 20 years. They love it. You like really, they love it. And it's one of those things where, like I said, if you enjoy what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And when you're working with incredible artists and storytellers and songwriters and musicians, like that is just so cool. You know what I mean? To have that like opportunity to be around that artistry, to me is super, super exciting.
Now, to me, one final question on the main day is you mentioned the fans quite a few times. So the fans are super invested into the whole contest of it all. How do you capture, and I think this is also a question for everyone, you know, covering just any event, how do you capture the guests? Because there's also a great part of it where you get a lot of energy from them, but they're obviously not the artists, they're not the main piece of content. These are the people that are bringing the energy at the end of the day. How did you cover them and how was the interaction with them?
Absolutely, you're totally right. It's about building a story. What I wish when I worked for the Eurovision Song Contest, so TikTok didn't exist. And I think the Eurovision Song Contest on TikTok is doing like such an amazing job in terms of brand and community that it's just a channel that I never got to explore with the Eurovision Song Contest brand because it just did not have its moment until after the pandemic, right? Or kind of during the pandemic. So we never had a TikTok channel when I worked there for the Eurovision Song Contest, but I think there's a lot of great opportunity community within that. But we did capture content mostly through Instagram story or Facebook story content, but we would go outside of the venue and we would capture people in the queue or in the line, right? Because the crowd there was electric. You can imagine everybody's dressed up, everybody has signs, everybody's excited to see their favorite artist. So the content they get and the energy from that would be super, super exciting. On the live, we would always, on the day of the live show, always start the stories with either like a time lapse of the line or like shots of like the crowd or just like being really excited and just really trying to kind of portray that energy as best we could. So within the live show, we mostly predominantly focused on Instagram stories to tell that, with also kind of like spoiler alerts, right? Because if you happen to miss the Eurovision Song Contest, it's like, don't check the Instagram stories because, you know, you're going to get the whole lot of what is happening.
I love how you also just explains how everyone is super excited, right? Not only the people working for it, it's also the artists, the fandom, excited for the moment. I think capturing moments and emotions is what it's all about for Eurovision Song Contest as well. Looking back at all the amazing things you've done and all the excitements from the job itself, what are your key learnings?
I have two, I would say. One is professional and one is more personal. So I think from a professional point of view, I think the thing that I learned the most about working for the Eurovision Song Contest is that when you have a brand like that, it feels like it belongs to everybody. Everybody has a piece of the Eurovision Song Contest and everybody looks at that brand slightly differently. And I think one of the learnings that I took from it, and actually something that they're doing so well right now, if you look at their social media presence, is really focusing now on the Eurovision brand itself. So it doesn't matter which country it's hosted in or which broadcaster is kind of really supporting in terms of the strategy. You get this idea of the underlining Eurovision brand and how exciting it is. And if you look at their Instagram and social media presence now, you really see in terms of like the colors, the tone, the formats that they're using, they're very, very consistent. And when we started with working with them, it was much more fan-led, right? In terms of like fly on the wall and just trying to capture the content through like a POV type of style. And now they're really kind of focusing on brand. And I think that is also what has elevated them. Such an increase now in followers and also kind of, just visibility on social, because I think they're really diving into the Eurovision brand. I think from a learning, I think it's so important to just kind of understand your brand narrative and what that story is and how you apply that to, every piece of PR, marketing or social strategy, especially with an event like the Eurovision Song Contest, which has been around for so long, that really people feel like so invested and they feel like, this is my Eurovision Song Contest. Contest, right? Like, these are the artists that I love. And I think it's hard to kind of find that mix. And I think that was one of the briefs that we had, right? Was to kind of how do we inject more of the brand into it? And I think right now they're doing that super beautifully. And I think on a personal level, in terms of one of my learnings from that experience, would be to just try and enjoy every single moment of it. Because, of course, there were times, like with any job, right, that I was so stressed. You're running around the venue, you're so stressed. You do feel a sense of pressure to really kind of make sure that you're delivering for the brand, but also for the audience and the fans who are so excited. And there were really moments where I was just, felt a little bit overwhelmed or felt stressed. But looking back, it was one of the most exciting professional experiences that I ever had. And I think if I could do it again, I would just enjoy it for what it was and kind of just take away a little bit of that stress and realize that actually, no, this is incredible. Like, you're working with the Eurovision Song Contest with so many artists, traveling all over Europe. Really, this is people's dream job. And I was living it. So I think you don't sometimes realize that you're having these really amazing moments when you're in them. It's only with hindsight. So I think personally that what I gained from it the most is to really just enjoy the now and realize that actually, like, this is really good.
I love both learning so much. I mean, in general, if you have event coverage, it's not a 9 to 5, right? It's a 24/7 and it can be very stressful. Mm-hmm. But if you look at right now, you still have those moments where you feel like proud. I can definitely feel like the energy and the excitement. And I do want to watch Eurovision with you guys this May.
Let's do it.
So for the people who are watching this podcast and want to become a social media manager or something like that, is there something you can advise on how to start, what to do, or anything else?
The biggest thing if you wanted to be a social media manager is understanding what that means specifically. And I think when you are a social media manager, it's kind of like this idea of, you're also effectively an influencer, not in the way that, you potentially are going and creating content, but you are really deciding, in that moment, what is this content going to look like? What is the objective of this content and how do I deliver it to an audience in order to influence them for, the product or the brand that you are working with? So the ultimate influencers are social media managers. They are the deciders of the brands in terms of who and what is going to be focused and, of course, who is going to be booked. So we are the beginning of that influencer journey, but like any influencer, it is more than just strategy, right? So it is more than just kind of trying to understand, okay, your brand, but it's, as I said before, a lot of the times you're a marketing strategist, you're also a copywriter, we're editors at times, and also producers, sometimes also content creators. So it's important to also have and enjoy all of these skills if you're going into social media. A lot of the times, they will be put into action. Right? I would say if you wanted to start, just understand the entire landscape of social media and have a basic knowledge when it comes to editing and copy and how you basically work with influencers and kind of go from there.
I think what I hear is definitely be passionate a bit and excited about wearing those hats, right? Like you mentioned, every day is so different. Every job within the landscape is so different. But I think what is the part of it is also being excited and having the lens. Like when you walk through the hallway, it's not like you're off social. You always have the lens on and you see and capture it because you know what's right in the moment. Excited about it.
You need to be a content creator, right? Like you said, Alex. When you were seeing the artist, you need to be on it. You need to see what is happening and how you can create content out of it.
Exactly. So you have to have that visual eye. And that doesn't necessarily mean creating the content specifically, because maybe there are people within the team that are stronger at, creating the production, but it's about spotting those moments and saying, I think we should do something here. So I think if you're also starting out on social media, try and find a brand you're really, really passionate about, because I think this also changes the game, because social media is so broad and you can be a social media for a pharmaceutical company or you can be a social media for the Eurovision Song Contest, right? And your day-to-day will be so different. So you also have to kind of figure out what is my passion, So for me, it's always been TV, film and entertainment. So it didn't really feel like work. Whereas, if you're a social media manager and, maybe you're working for the Eurovision Song Contest, but actually you're passionate about pharmaceuticals, you're not going to enjoy your day-to-day, right? So it's such a broad experience that you can have as a social media manager that the brand or the agency that you work with is so important.
So one last bit of advice that I need, maybe also for personal reasons, but I feel like you've captured like one of the biggest events ever. Is there something that you would advise somebody who maybe enters the event space, looks around, notices, fuck, so much going on, where do I even start? what would be your advice? Where do we start?
I would say start from a place of understanding what you would want to see. I think in terms of like when we think of social content, I think yes, for sure, it can definitely be really overwhelming, especially within an event space where there's so much happening. And quite frankly, also, unless you have a very, very large team, you cannot capture everything. So you have to think about those key moments, those important things that you think, this is really going to drive conversation. Or me as a viewer, if I was to look at this story, this is the type of that I would want to see, and kind of go from there. And I think often what we want to see as an audience, we don't necessarily want to see the polished picture of the artist standing next to the step and repeat board looking perfect. We want to see the moment of them just being authentic. We want to maybe see them kind of rehearsing. So to me, if you're covering an event space, especially on social media, it's like, what can we offer that is a little bit different? And most of the time that is BTS. When it comes to, marketing and PR, they capture the red carpet moments. They're going to capture the big, moments of announcement or on the stage or within kind of press interviews. So it's like, how do you develop that personal connection? So I would kind of start from this idea of what is different in terms of the content, and how can I capture that moment that just feels more authentic.
I love that. I think storytelling is also a big thing here, right? How do you tell the story of what is going on? So my final last question, I think we've pretty much already, discussed it, but working with such a big brand, and we all know it can also destroy your POV. Would you still watch the Eurovision contest, and do you still look at it from a place of love rather than something where you're like, oh my god, this was horrible?
I definitely see it through a place of love, if not even more so than I did before, because I just think the amount of effort at school that goes into producing that content is so enormous that you will never really understand unless you're working there. So from a production point of view, I have nothing but admiration for the EBU and the team and the broadcasters that actually go into setting that up in just 1 year. 12 months. To have all of those eyeballs on your country set up is incredible. So I think what they do is so impressive. And then yes, when I watch it, I really, really love it, because it just takes me back to that time where I imagine okay, that was me waiting backstage or waiting to jump on the stage and interview with the artist. So I really, really love it. But what I will say, if you watch the film Eurovision with Will Ferrell, it is not like that. It is not
true.
like that at all. It's
Maybe
very,
that's
very
a good thing. I never watched the film. I remember people said it was quite tacky.
I watched it. It was tacky.
I never
Yes,
Did
it
you
was
watch
tacky.
It?
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
very Hollywood.
I was surprised. Yeah, because Rachel McAdams, she's normally a super good actress, right? So I was surprised that she was starring in this kind of film, but I literally just saw the trailer and I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah,
this is not for me.
As when we were working for the Eurovision Song Contest, we were aware that the film was being made because they collaborated very closely with EBU, so it was very, very exciting, especially when we found out Rachel McAdams. And I loved the film, don't get me wrong. I thought it in terms of just a fun time film to watch, but it was just interesting from an insider perspective to watch it, because I was like, what is happening right now is impossible, or mainly because how they shoot the artists, right? I think there was a lot of parties within that film when the artists were there getting drunk, and actually it's a very, very serious song contest, and really, in my experience anyway, the artists are super strict. They're out getting drunk at the after parties, right? They're practicing, they're on bed rest, they're totally serious. So yeah, I just thought the perspective was super interesting.
Maybe a hint for everyone who wants to work there and watch the film. It's not like that. So that's a dream that has just, disappeared. Okay, thank you so much, Alex. So one final last question, because you're the first podcast guest on Social First, and obviously we still want to have a lot more guests on the podcast. Who of your network should join for an interview on Social First next?
I would say, I think if you're looking at the social media landscape, of course, creators are at the heart of the social media landscape, right? So when it comes to, how we show up, the stories that we want to tell, but also the links that we want to make within brand and talent, I think is so important. And I think that's really, really obvious and increasingly more obvious when it comes to some of these brand collaborations and partnerships. So I would definitely say a really great insight, and also just a different look at the social lens, would be talking from somebody who's very skilled when it comes to influencer marketing, talent and casting. So I would recommend a lovely colleague that I have called Andreas, who is really just focused on connecting brands, holistically with talent.
Super exciting. Right. We need to make that connection with Andreas for sure. And Alex, thank you so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
already excited to this episode and get it out there for everyone. And I know that a lot of people I know are already excited. This is basically the episode for everyone who is always screaming, why is the podcast not in English? So,
Exactly.
Alex made it happen.
Also, big thank you from me. And yes, that was it. It's the first episode. If you don't know, Eurovision Song Contest is on the 15th of May, this time in Switzerland. I'm super excited that Nemo won last year. Oh yeah, if you're not following us already, check out in the bio our links to our social media. Please subscribe to this podcast. Yeah, we see each other next week. Bye.